Today, to celebrate our 100th episode, we'll be highlighting our top 10 best clips. This is the Jack Bosch Show.
Let's go into what's going on in your life right now. Obviously, the audience, if you have never heard of Morby, you've been living under a rock. So you need to look him up. You need to subscribe to him. You need to check A&E, his television show. You need to
don't check out the
YouTube.
TV show. Sucks.
It doesn't suck.
It's a great show. It's just that it's a fix and flip show, which is not. I'm not really a fix and flipper.
Yeah.
It was, it was more of a brand play for us. Of like, I'll give you guys a good example of why TV was such a good idea. And also...
Yeah, let's talk about that.
TV was a good idea, not because I make much money on it. I mean, we get paid like $50,000 a year each. And if you look at how much work we put into it, I actually lose money, a tremendous amount of money on the show. What I learned in year one of doing this was 3 years ago when we filmed season 1. Everybody's like, why are you doing a TV show? You already have a YouTube channel that gets millions of views every single month. And my answer was because, one, I want to be able to say I did a TV show before TV completely dies in 10 years, right? Like TV will die in 10 years. It's gone. It's going to be gone.
Yeah.
And we see it dismantling now anyway. Most everybody's going to streaming. And so we decided, let's go check that box. That's kind of like this old thought process of TV is really, really cool. I'm still of an age that I think TV is cool. And being able to say you are on TV is very cool.
Yeah.
I'm also still of an age where if somebody says you got put in a magazine, I'd be like, that's pretty legit. Nowadays, nobody reads magazines, right? So we took the TV show, one, because we thought it would be fun. Two, I knew that it would be the most credible thing that I could bring up when I get introduced.
Right.
As silly as that sounds, I'll give you a good example. 4 years ago, I hung out with Grant Cardone probably 5 times. I'd been in a bunch of rooms with him for five or six other reasons. Never remembered me, which is perfectly fine, right? Like I don't live, breathe, and die for Grant Cardone.
Right.
But like you, he's one of my heroes, and I appreciate a lot of the things he does in terms of marketing and understanding. And his company culture also is phenomenal. When you actually go to his office, you're like, holy crap, this is phenomenal. But
high energy. Right.
High energy, loyalty, just amazing. They get the mission and they get it done, which is amazing. So one day we go, hey, we want to do a podcast with Grant. And so we reach out to their team and they go, no problem. That'll be $165,000. And I was like, that's a lot of money to do a podcast with a guy. And I was like, here's what that means for me. I'm not opposed to buying relationships. I've bought relationships before. I go to a mastermind to buy relationships.
Right.
That's what I do, right? I'm not opposed to that, but what that's telling me is that I have not brought enough value to Grant and that there's not an equal exchange for us spending time together. So I said, what could I do that would bring an equal exchange to somebody like a Grant Cardone? Because every time I go to a Grant Cardone or somebody like that, a Patrick Bet-David or somebody else, I'm going to have to write a check for $165,000 if I want that relationship, or I can go internally and say, where can I provide value? And the TV show was the answer. Here's what ended up happening. I get the TV show maybe a year after the 165 conversation happened. And what happened was I was at a party again. Somebody goes, hey, Grant's here. Are you friends with Grant? I go, we have met. He doesn't remember me. He wanted to charge me $165,000 for a podcast. So let me put it that way. And the guy's like, let me go introduce you. I'm like, all right, sounds good. He goes over and introduces me and says, hey, Grant, this is Morby, the host of Triple Digit Flip on A&E. It was the first time somebody had not introduced me as a real estate investor, but a TV host. And immediately Grant pulls out his phone. Elena pulls out their phone. They go, take our cell phone number. Let's collaborate. Let's go to dinner. Can we get on your TV show? And it was like, now they wanted something from me. And the TV show's done that for us for 50 different relationships. It's opened up doors that nothing else. Even though my YouTube channel does well and other things do well, and I buy all this real estate and we help all these people and I've changed lives and I've done all these things, there's certain doors I cannot open unless I say I have a TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if somebody's like a little bit more of the talker and extrovert, exuberant kind of person, somebody else is a little bit more the introvert, calmer, slower speaking kind of thing. How do how do they adjust their approach based on that? Because what I hear say is like, no, you don't have to become everyone like David Van, right? Everyone can develop their own style, but can they still do those things?
Yeah. So a lot of people use the keyword confidence. That comes up a lot in sales training, in the industry. Confidence is, name one thing that you're really good at. You don't need anybody to tell you that you're good at. You know you're good at. For me, it's my mom's chicken pot pie. When I think about my mom's chicken pot pie, I love that. I could literally eat it for 2 weeks. There's nothing better than my mom's chicken pot pie. And when I tell it to my mom, she puts her chest out and she's like, oh yeah, it's my chicken pot pie. Nobody can tell my mom how to cook that chicken pot pie, okay? So that confidence she's having when she's mixing that chicken pot pie in the kitchen is 100,000%. So if I was training my mom on how to close and how to sell and all this stuff, I would tell my mother, you are the best in the world at making chicken pot pie. I want you to have that concept in your head. Act like you're making chicken pot pie while you're on the call with them. Have that kind of emotion in your heart. So whatever it is, whether you're a tech guy, whether you're a social media influencer, whether you're a landscaper, right? When landscapers talk to the client, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to put this palm tree over here. We're going to put this palm tree over here. Well, that's confidence. Okay. And so when you're dealing with a buyer or seller, people say you have to have confidence because people, like, we are animals. We are looking for little cues. Is this person lying to me or not? And when you have confidence, it's an indicator that they're telling the truth. Okay. Right. So you have to obviously know your product. You have to absolutely speak and stand up straight, stick your chest out, right? And that's why I stand up and I walk all day long, probably about 14 hours a day. But that's why I like to do it, because I want the person that I'm talking to, that I'm working with on a deal, I want them to know, like, and trust me, and really I really want this to be an experience for them. And I want them to get off that call and make that decision on the call. And I don't want them to call me back 5 minutes later and say, hey, listen, I changed my mind. Right. And that's because they don't have confidence anymore in the deal, or myself. Yeah.
Right. They feel like they've been strong-armed into it. I don't want that.
Yeah.
So now to wrap this up, what can somebody out there, can you come up with, let's say, 1, 2, 3, as many as you want, tips of what somebody can do starting today to improve their sales game? Like whether they're selling land, like many of our coaching students do. Like we have lots of people that have never sold anything in their life, and they're now looking to sell land, and they don't know how to go about it. So when they're in our coaching, they have sessions on that, on how to have this conversation with the buyer and the seller, and how to ask those right questions that make them want to close on it. But another one, everyone is out there. Let's give some value to everyone out there that just wants to get better in sales. What are kind of a couple of things they can start doing today that will make them better in sales?
Yeah. Well, number one, I would definitely say that when I talked earlier about, you have to know yourself, is I did a lot of training looking at myself in the mirror. Okay. If you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can tell the truth to yourself, and yourself is looking right back at you, then your confidence is going to build. So if you're struggling with confidence, I would suggest doing some mirror work and maybe run through your keywords, some of your lines, your opening pitches and stuff like that. Make it really quick. But the first thing I would actually do is you're going to have to introduce yourself properly on the call. When you pick up the phone, you're talking to a buyer or seller, you gotta have the right tonality. You don't want to act like an infomercial person. You don't want to do that. So, oh, okay, hi, this is David. Oh my God, I'm gonna hang up on that person. I will literally hang up on you. Okay. So, very first thing you want to do is stand up straight. Okay, stick your chest out. Get the Bluetooth out of your ear. Put the phone up to your ear and say, "Hey, Joe, this is David." Okay, announce yourself with some presence. Okay, and then go on to why you called them in the first place, whatever your industry is. Okay, and then the second thing is, don't be afraid to ask them questions on why this is a good fit for them. A lot of salespeople are trying to convince you something. I'm convincing you this is a good fit. I'm convincing you. Ask them. So, Jack, why do you think this is a good property for you? Why is this a good situation for you? Why did you call me today? Walk me through that, okay? Right. I want to build a relationship there. And then lastly, don't always try to ask the closing questions. Most times, if you're smart, you're good, you're slow, and you slow it down enough, they're going to ask the closing questions to you. It's going to be a much more fluid conversation. It's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be a lot funner, and you're going to make a lot more money.
If somebody has a $10,000 property, can you afford to offer him $4,500 for that deal? No, because what are you going to sell it for? $6,000. If you buy it for $4,500 plus closing costs, do you even make any money? No, there's no money left for you to be made. So therefore, you can't do that. So therefore, a $10,000 property, you have to get at 10 cents or 15 cents on the dollar. Because if you get it at $1,500 and you sell it at $6,000, even after closing costs, you're still making at least $3,000, $4,000 on the deal. Now, a $100,000 property, can you offer $40,000 or $50,000 on that deal and sell it for $65,000? Yes, of course. Now, $1 million property, can you offer $600,000 on that property or $700,000 on that property and sell it for $780,000 again, which is still a good deal? Yes. So you start seeing, like, the higher the property value, the higher the percentage you want to offer on these deals. Now, what happens at the same time, that doesn't mean you automatically offer the high dollar amounts or the high percentages, because what happens when you make low dollar amounts? Here's Nancy Swar, one of our former master coaches. She actually retired from that, but she's still available for some students to do like specialty calls, because she's transitioned actually into developing land. And she says, like, just want to post another example of how well Jack and Michelle's system works. Or anyway, she received this call this morning from somebody. So the seller wanted $68,000 and the market value was $105,000. So they looked at it. They said, I want $68K. Is that an unreasonable amount of money when the property is worth $100, $105? It's not unreasonable, but it didn't make sense to Nancy because she wanted to do a certain deal with it. So she offered $21,930 on the deal. They countered with $25. Right? So again, the thing is, just because they want 68, it doesn't change anything in your calculations. You offer what you think you need to offer. And then if it doesn't get accepted, well, then you can work your way into it with follow-up strategies, which we'll talk about much more tomorrow. Now, I love this one. This one is my favorite of all times. This one says, let me read it here. This one says, I can't even read it. It says, like, somebody says on the bottom, it says, we're not interested in selling at this amount. She offered $60. If you would be willing to consider a minimum of $100, we will sign the papers. Otherwise, not worth our time. Right? So there we go. Some people, $40 is the world. Right? So it's all good. Right? So again, it's funny, but it's true. So don't be afraid of offering low dollar amounts. Some people will accept it. Now, if they would have come back like, this is ridiculous, I want $1,000, I don't know what this property was worth, but actually she did tell us that she actually sold it. If I'm not mistaken, she sold it for $17,000. But so if they would have come back like, $60, are you freaking kidding me? I want $2,000 for it. Would that have still been a deal? Oh yeah. So don't be afraid of making low offers, because sometimes you get deals like that. Right?
Yeah, it was the Soviet Union. I was 12 when we emigrated here. It was right after the wall fell. So I'll date myself here, but we came in '92. Now I was 12 years old. So I remember living in Soviet Union vividly. I remember standing when I was 7, 8 years old on a regular basis, standing in bread lines. You know, people think bread lines are like this euphemism that Republicans love to use to like scare people against socialism. No, like I stood in actual lines for bread on a regular basis when I was a child, 3-4 hour lines.
And we're not talking about the line around the block for the best bakery in town that just is very popular. No, just to get a piece of bread somewhere, right?
Right, just rye bread. You had a choice. You had a choice. You could choose any bread you wanted as long as it was rye bread.
Right. That's crazy. I mean, I was in Moscow in 1991, and I still saw some of these things happening. Literally, I was hosted by a family there. We were there with a band, with an orchestra, and we were all hosted in private kind of places. And every day, grandma was sent to town with basically with her purse full of money to just go buy whatever she can find, because you can always trade whatever she could find against with somebody else against something they found. Is that?
I still have, I brought, when we immigrated here, I found this recently. You know, everybody has like a box of weird stuff from their childhood that they haven't opened in 20 years. And I looked through, I found this box in my parents' house of random things from my teenage years. And I brought over actual food vouchers. My family would get weekly food coupons that we would use because they were rationing bread and basic goods. And again, this is not like Soviet Russia in the 1920s when they were just figuring out socialism, right? This is like 70 years later. And at the end of it, they still couldn't figure it out. 70 years later, they still couldn't figure out how to feed people and deliver basic necessities to them. So yeah, so I grew up there. I remember living there vividly. I remember lines for food and for basic necessities, and I remember the culture shock of coming here when I was 12 years old, and we moved to Virginia. So we immediately went from Moscow to suburbia America, and like so it was like landing on a different planet. People were like strangers were smiling at us, which in and of itself was absolutely strange. Because in Russia, like nobody smiled in general, and strangers definitely wouldn't smile at you. And I remember the first time when I was 12 years old, I walked into an American grocery store. And it was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just aisles and aisles, shelves stocked with food and no lines and people fighting over it. And it was like we literally just landed on a different planet. So I remember all that stuff vividly, and you know, gives me an appreciation for kind of basic things in life that my kids will never understand, unfortunately.
Yeah, did that appreciation ever go away, or you still remember it? I mean, you obviously still remember it, but did that kind of wane off over time and it got normalized, or you still have moments where you go back to that?
Well, no, of course it normalizes. We as humans have a very easy time adjusting to improvements in life and making that the new normal. We have a very hard time adjusting our standards of living down and getting used to that. So no, of course, on a regular basis, I no longer walk through grocery stores like,
Of course, yes.
oh, this is amazing, you know. But I still have that memory, and so occasionally I do remind myself of kind of where we came from and just how good we have it, but also how easy it is to lose those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a good chart that if everyone goes and looks, it's basically two of these lines, and one of the lines represents your average mortgage price, and the other line is this chart over history that represents your average rental price. And if you look at it, there's times in history where they intersect, and sometimes it's more expensive to own a home than it is to rent, and sometimes it's the rent is more than it's buy. So it's this great historical chart that shows you the best times in history to buy versus rent. And if you look at where the rent line is right now versus where the average mortgage price is right now, there has never been a greater discrepancy in how much it costs to own a home versus rent a home. Right now, the indicators are screaming rent. It has never been more expensive compared to renting in history right now. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to capitalize on the build to rent space and hold more of these assets.
Yeah. I was about to say that doesn't that kind of contract what you said about building and selling, but it makes sense because of that, doesn't mean there's no need. It just means that you're better off building to rent than building potentially to sell right now, because selling is just slightly unaffordable right now, which therefore it's also the smart move to then build the cheapest you can. I mean, the cheapest, build high quality, but the least price point as possible so that it is affordable and it can fly off the market quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, you're always going to need housing, right? You're always going to need housing. And just, depending on what the economy does, different asset classes do really well. Commercial multifamily is taking a big hit because of interest rates. But you're still seeing a lot of demand for entry level housing because, again, you've got huge supply imbalances. 33% of the home buying population needs an entry level home, but less than 10% of homes being built are an entry level home.
What's the worst kind of thing that happened to you during those ghettoologist days? I just want to get back to that.
Oh gosh, there's so many stories. So I'm in the ghetto one day, and you ever hear those stories about police officers have been police officers for like 30 years, and the one day they don't wear their vest, they get shot or killed in the line of duty. It's like I wore it for 30 years, and the one day I don't, I get killed in the line of duty. Well, similar. Not compare myself to a police officer. Their job is very hard and all that. But one day I went to the ghetto and I didn't bring my gun. I used to have a gun on my hip and I didn't. And it just so happened that day I was at an apartment building I owned. I owned a 48 unit apartment building at that time. And I go there and meet with my manager. And just so happens that somebody let someone in the door who got released from the psych ward or something from a hospital. He had a PICC line in his arm and he was on, this is things you learn in the ghetto. He was on wet. Now, if you don't, do you know what wet is?
No idea.
It's wet is when someone inhales, huffs, however they do it, embalming fluid.
Okay.
Yeah. It gets you, if you can't get drugs, you do that. And it makes you crazy, you go out of your mind. So this guy approaches, he comes into the hallway of the building, and my manager and I are there, and his eyes are coming out of his head. And he's kind of a big guy. I mean, he's about 6 foot. I'm 6 foot, so we're about the same size, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's trying to start a problem. He wanted something. And I go to grab him to like push him back, and I could feel his strength. He had like superhuman strength, right? Like whatever he was on, like I knew right when I grabbed him and I had adrenaline going that I wasn't gonna be able to take this guy. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a gun on me. So I ran back to our little maintenance center and I grab a hammer. I'm like, I'm going to have to hit him with a hammer, like in the head. And I remember walking back, my building manager's kind of tied up with him, and I got this hammer and I'm kind of going like this, feeling the hammer, because the hammer didn't feel very heavy to me. Like usually a hammer would have some weight to it, like it doesn't feel heavy. Maybe it's going to have an adrenaline rush. But I came to find out later, it didn't feel heavy to me because it was a hammer that was bought at the dollar store. Okay. So it was a dollar store hammer. So it didn't have any weight. Right. So I'm walking and I'm thinking, I'm going to hit him and it's just going to make him madder at me, right? Like it's not going to do anything. It's like a little, like almost like a fake hammer. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, this isn't going to work. I drop the hammer and I see my building manager kind of tied up with him. And he looks at me, I look at him, and I just push him out this steel door and pull my manager back in, and I pulled the door shut. And at that point, he was on the outside. We were on the inside. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. All right. He can't get back in, lock the building down. And then within a few minutes, like 3 police officers ended up pulling up to the building. They drew down on him, and they didn't shoot him, but they had him in cuffs, and away he went. That was probably one of the scariest things ever happened to me. Okay, now, if I would have had a gun, though, probably wouldn't have been a good day for that gentleman.
So now here's Joe driving his Bentley to his lake house, looking for a place in Windermere, Florida to go with a family and things like that. But sometimes in business and life, particularly in real estate, you got to be ready to be prepared to face some difficult situations.
So let's talk about some cash deals versus seller financing deals. Again, one of the key is that you don't want to go blind into a deal. Basically, you look at when you get that deal, when you make that offer, when you get that offer accepted, or ideally at the point of making the actual offer, you want to go and make sure that that you already have, in a way, in the back of your mind at least, a plan for that deal. So obviously, when what Aaron said earlier, if you have $100,000, if you know you can sell properties for $100,000 and you make $70,000 offers, then your plan is to make that a cash sale, right? Because you got somebody that immediately can pay you $100,000 for it. If you want to, as a strategy, if you want the gentleman earlier, Kreshmir or something, what was his name? Kreshnik, I think. Kreshnik mentioned that you have, if you want seller financing deals, then you got to approach your deals a little bit different, and you got to make different offers. Because if he wants to do a seller financing deal, then offering $70,000 on a property that he can sell for $100,000 is not going to get him to that result. It's going to get him to $30,000 in cash, which he then can actually turn around and then perhaps self-fund some seller financing deals, but it's not immediately going to get him seller financing deals. So in essence, when you look at it, if you have a high value property and you offer a high price, that's a wholesale deal. Because otherwise you don't get as a down payment as much as you need to. If you have a high value property and you offer a low price and you get it accepted, then that is a great candidate either for a wholesale deal or for a seller financing deal. Obviously, you can always wholesale. If you have a super low price, like something like what's mentioned earlier, Roland mentioned that you get a super low price and a super low value. That's the kind of deals that I think the lady, what was your name again? Andrea. That was Andrea is sometimes doing. I bet some of these deals you sell for seller financing too, right? Almost all of them, yeah. So she gets them for $300, sells them for $4,500, and you probably get what as a down payment? $300 to $500? $500 as a down payment. Yes. How did I know that? Because we've probably done a few hundred of those ourselves, right? So you get it for down. You get it accepted for $300, sell it for $4,500 with a $500 down payment. Monthly payments of what? $149 or $97 to $200? Yeah, $199.99. How did I know that? I don't know. $99 to $149. So that she'll need like 15 deals to do that. But again, those deals, they're like everywhere, and there's lots of them that you can do that. Again, different exit strategies and different goals drive different strategies in how you do this.
I have a friend in Phoenix, Arizona, who bought land 40 years ago, and today their family is worth over $100 million because their land became the 10 freeway. It's like winning in the lottery. So explain to us, Jack, how can people forecast?
That information is all publicly available in every city in the United States. It's not something that in Phoenix you can find out. Detroit has that. Minnesota, Minneapolis, every city has that available to them. And that is particularly if you have a city that consists out of multiple cities. Like you have Phoenix and Glendale thing, and like every city has, in Scottsdale and all this kind of things together. What they do is they put together a government of governments in a way, so a council, let's say, they get together and then they plan the entire metro area out. They basically say, well, we know that we're getting X amount of people per year moving into this area, so we know we need to improve infrastructure, we need to grow, we need to put in another interstate over there, we need to expand the roads over here. Because when you see the city coming up and start building something, start expanding the road, they didn't wake up to this morning saying like, hey, let's go out there and let's go expand the road. That plan was made 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, how far out do they forecast?
They forecast 30 years ago.
30 years
ahead of
Is this like government officials?
Yeah, this is like local, county level government.
So there's
officials.
Not infighting there with
I'm
new
sure there's
regimes
infighting,
coming
but
in?
eventually they settle on it. I haven't attended none of these meetings, but what they have, and that's the
they don't adjust it once it's set for 30 years.
Well, they do some adjustments, but they generally, what they produce, and they refresh that and renew that every year, is a 30-year regional development plan.
Every year.
So that thing basically shows exactly where they're planning to put the next roads, where the next interstate is going to go in, where they're planning to put a city park, what's going to be rezoned to be commercial, and all this kind of stuff. And you can get your hands on that right now, and then literally go out there, buy land there today when nobody knows that this is happening, and then just sit on it. And when the development comes in, you're right smack on the main road. Like I have a friend that did that in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Like, I don't know anyone that lives in Albuquerque, but Albuquerque is growing too. So right outside of Albuquerque, there's an area where he got that plan and he looked at like what's coming up. So what he did, it's very smartly, he bought the lots that were behind the lots that were on the road. Now, why is that? The lots behind the main road-facing lots are worth nothing.
Right.
But he knew what the city's going to do is they're going to go to eminent domain, they're going to take over all the lots on the city because that street would be widened by a factor of 3x.
Yep.
So it became a massive street. And guess what happened to his lots? They were now directly on the road. So they went up 10x in value in a matter of about 3 years, and he made millions of dollars just with that strategy.
Incredible.
And you can do that for short-term strategies. You can go out where the development is out 10, 20 years out and buy there, and then just sit on it. And then on top of it, there's a few extra strategies. For example, we're doing that on a bunch of land in and outside of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And that's what we're calling land banking, correct, Jack?
Pardon?
That's what we're calling land banking, correct?
That's essentially a very passive land banking. Like big land banking companies, they come in and they do some entitlements and they do some work on it. I just sit on the land and wait for the development to come around and they do nothing with it. That's the easiest way.
So
I'm even
here's a question. I've got a good question on the screen. If you look at it, Joel Shipley, he always comes up with a great question. And I think this question is more along the lines of, he says land flipping versus land development. Let me tell you what I think he's asking.
What's happening right now is that all of these office spaces are half empty and the leases are not being renewed and the landlords can't pay their mortgages and the banks are about to foreclose on them, and it's a huge shit show. Now, in addition to that, there's a few other things that happen. Political factors matter in real estate. All of a sudden, for whatever reasons, particularly blue states, particularly blue cities, like San Francisco, New York, and so on, particularly in California, they have decided, but in many other states, Chicago is going through the same kind of situation, and many other cities, they have decided to decriminalize petty theft and also to defund the police. And guess what happened? You have less police, and you're actually not pursuing theft in San Francisco, for example, I think up to $800. You can go into a store and steal up to $800 worth of stuff. First of all, how wrong is that? But anyway, that's a different subject. And if they call the police either won't do anything, won't even arrest you, or they won't even come. What this has led to is that the inner city, the office part of the city, the commercial district of cities like San Francisco is in shambles. Full of homeless people, full of crime. Stores are leaving, office buildings are shutting down because nobody's there, right? It's become a filthy mess of a place. And the skyscrapers in those cities are for sale for 30, 40 cents on the dollar, and nobody's even buying them. Because what can you do with a skyscraper like that? Now, if you have an office building that's just a one-story office building, you can convert it into whatever one of these bouncy places for kids, right? You convert it into a flex space where people can go in and just like work from an office space for a little bit. You can convert it into warehouses and things like that. Some of them even convert them to multifamily. But what can you do with a skyscraper? It just sits there and it rots. And here's the thing. This will not stop. This is not something that's going to go away, because work from home is here to stay. So let's talk about a wrap. Do you guys know what a wrap is? Who does not know what a wrap is? And it's not what you get at Subway, right? So that's a sandwich anyway. So here's the thing. So what happens in a wrap is the following concept. The concept of a wrap is where you go and you buy a property with seller financing, and then you go sell it with seller financing. But what you pay the seller is this, and what the buyer pays you is that. You guys make sense? So basically it's the following. So let's say you have a seller willing to sell you, but the sell the property to you, but the price that he's selling it to is too high to make that a deal. Right, so now what you do, but you ask the seller, well, Mr. Seller, I'm okay, I can pay you $90,000 or $80,000 for your property. If it's worth 100, let's say, I can pay you $80,000 for the property if you're willing to extend seller financing. And the seller's going to be like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, how about I give you $2,000 down and like $300 a month for the next, 10 years, and then I'll pay it off. And the seller might say, well, why not? A little cash flow is better than having your property just sit there. So in essence, you buy the property with seller financing. You become the buyer, but at very favorable terms to you. Like low interest rate, low monthly payments, low down payment. right? So, and then you agree that to a loan down, low interest rate, and low payments, exactly. So then what happens is you turn around and you now resell the property at just a little bit more, but with a big down payment and with big monthly payments, right? So the high down payment, high interest, and high monthly payments. So let's do this example. Let's say the property's worth $100,000. The seller is willing to sell it to you at $75,000. Okay? So 75 grand. And you agree that you will just give them a $5,000 down payment. Alex, what happened here? Those railings are gone. Did the union finally agree to take them off? You took them off? Okay, well, you violated the union. They're gonna be upset with us. Anyway, so with $5,000 down and 5% interest for 18 years, let's say, no balloon. Just simply you agree that you're going to pay that off for $75,000 with $5,000 down, 5% interest for 18 years. Like, are there people who are going to do that? Yes, in order to get a higher interest rate, get a higher price, people willing to carry terms, and not everyone wants 18% interest or 15% interest, things like that. There's a lot of people who say like, well, this property sits there producing nothing right now. If I have money, I would just put it in CDs at 4 or 5%. So why don't you just pay me 5%? Sure. So you do that, and the monthly payment would come down to $500.91, which you now are paying. You can also negotiate that you start the payment only in 2 months or 3 months. You don't necessarily have to start, oh, well, there we go. I didn't even, it's already there. That you start the payments only in 2 months. So now that gives you 2 months to sell this property again. So now you turn around and you sell it, and you sell it for a full $100,000 with a $20,000 down payment, and with 15% interest, and for 18 years, the same time period, but your monthly payments are $1,073.35 that you collect now. You collect that kind of money. And you can already see the results, right? You pay the seller $591 each month, but you collect $1,073 each month. And that's in the middle, it's called the spread, and that spread is a $572.44 positive cash flow each month that you make on a deal that you otherwise would have had to skip on. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. That's creative finance again, right? So that means that $572.44 over 18 years is $123,647.04. That's your profit on a deal. And it consists of a few components. First of all, it consists, plus you have the $15,000 in your pocket, because what was? You paid $5,000 as a down payment, but you received $20,000 as a down payment. So you have $15,000 cash in the pocket, and you have a spread of $572.44 every single month. Is that cool stuff? Is that good stuff? That's what we're talking about. Again, so your total profit on that is $138,647, including those $15,000, or your ROI in this deal is 2,672%.